All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's event where we will dive into opportunities and career pathways in the ocean sector, a webinar for post-secondary students and early career individuals. So my name is Kaylin Correa, and I work with Ocean Networks Canada, and I will be your host for today's session. Thank you all so much for joining. It's great to see so many of you in the audience, and we are really looking forward to our discussion today with the panel and to hear all of your wonderful questions. So just a quick housekeeping note before we begin. We will be recording the webinar, so just be sure to keep your cameras turned off and also make sure you're in speaker view, and that will be the best way to see what's going on. All right, so I'll first hand it over to Peter Romer, who is the Indigenous Community Liaison with Ocean Networks Canada, for an introduction.
Hello, bonjour, and welcome. My Dutch name is Peter Romer, and my native name is Gaan, meaning wooden bowl. In West Coast culture, a wooden bowl is what the wealth is shared into and then shared back. I am Niska'a from people of the Nass River, from the Lachibu clan, or Wolf clan, in Gingolith, BC. I'm speaking from the Cowichan tribe territory today. We acknowledge and respect the Lekwungen peoples whose traditional territory the University of Victoria stands, and recognize the Songhees, Esquimalt, and Wasanish peoples whose historical relationships with the land continue to this day. Lekwungen, which includes the Songhees, Esquimalt together, means people of smoked herring. They were big traders of herring, which was from the gorge. Sometimes people would trade canoes for their herring. It was that good. Wasanish means emerging land people as they survived the Great Flood 10,000 years ago. They were saved by tying their cedar ropes to the top of their mountain, Tlelwanuk. These rich stories give a sense of place, and I encourage all of you to understand where you come from and where you live. Thank you. Enjoy the presentations today.
Thank you, Peter, for starting us off with that today. So I'm seeing some hands in the audience. If you have a question, just pop it into our Q&A or our chat, and we'll keep an eye out. We'll answer those shortly. So today we are exploring one of Ocean Week Canada's online toolkits. And this one is targeted specifically for post-secondary students and those interested in opportunities within the ocean sector. So this was and is a collaborative effort between various organizations. So we'll first touch briefly on those and learn about how each of them are involved. And then Ashley Bowes with Ecop Canada will take us through an exploration of the toolkit, and you'll be welcome to follow along with that on your own computer. And then towards the end, we'll have our panel discussion with the wonderful speakers that I'm sure you've heard about joining us today. And finally, we'll wrap up with our Q&A period. So continuing on now, feel free to pop your questions into the Q&A button on the bottom. It should be beside the chat button, and we will get to those later. And we'll save the chat for any comments, as well as sharing some links with you in that. All right, so I'll hand it over first to Megan Callan, the Communications and Graphic Design Lead with the Canadian Ocean Literacy Coalition.
Thanks, Kaylin. Hi, everybody. So first, I'm just going to give you a brief overview of what COLC, or the Canadian Ocean Literacy Coalition, is and how we came to be. So the coalition was originally created for a very specific purpose. It was to run a national study across Canada to kind of get a stock take of ocean literacy across the country. That was done. And then that was turned into the national strategy, making Canada the first country in the world to have an ocean literacy national strategy. So after that wrapped up, we kind of, well, I wasn't there yet, but they kind of thought that this was going to be it for the coalition. It had done its piece, and now people were going to take that strategy and run with it. But that wasn't quite the case. And it was very clear that the coalition itself was filling a much needed niche. So 4 years later, we're still here and very busy, and we are working on a number of projects that fill these community established mandates or action streams that were identified in the national study and are being moved forward per the national strategy. So one of those major projects is Ocean Week Canada. We can go to the next slide. Great. So Ocean Week Canada, or OWC, has a number of pieces to it. It is probably our it's definitely our biggest initiative that we run. And this past year, we had over 15 core content partners and well over 100 event partners. So one of the major pieces was to design the entire kind of look, branding, feel for Ocean Week Canada, and that turned into the design of the website. We also brought on an external organization to create a full communication strategy and a media relations plan, as well as an impact framework and community engagement strategy that could look at what comes out of Ocean Week Canada and see if it's actually advancing that national strategy that I spoke of. We also had an artist animators program with artists from across the country that are also going to continue along and make an appearance, hopefully at IMPAC5 in February. We had a video collection with coastal stories from across the country and Indigenous water guardian stories from across the country, and that is continuing to expand as well. And we also had the massive Ocean Week Canada map, which is honestly a project in and of itself. And that is a giant map of the waterways, both fresh and ocean waters in Canada. It is 8.5 by 11 meters, so it's absolutely massive. And we've also created an augmented reality app that goes along with it. So this was done in partnership with Ocean School and Canadian Geographic. And many of those maps were printed and are already in circulation. I'll speak a little bit more about that later. But the final piece is the toolkit. So we had core content partners come in and create toolkits for designated audiences. And the one that you'll hear a lot more about today was Ocean Networks Canada and Ecop Canada that came in and helped develop the one for post-secondary and early career. So very briefly, Ocean Week Canada was a big success this last year. We were hoping to have 50 events across the country, and we had 160. And we had more than 675,000 people participate in events across the country. We had events in every single province and territory except for Nunavut, and we're hoping to get up into Nunavut this next year. We had over 311,000 views of that video collection. And we reached over 4.5 million people through social media. We also had 29 traditional media stories. And as I mentioned, we had 72 map bookings, which has fully booked the maps that are in circulation to schools for 2023. So we've gone ahead and we've started printing additional maps. And we're also working on printing half-size maps because a lot of institutions just don't have the space. So lots more coming with that. And you can download the augmented reality app for Android and iOS now. And you can spawn that map anywhere you want. So on your kitchen table, in your backyard, and you can explore that at home. It's version 1. So we're always looking for feedback as we advance. But it's all come together. And you can explore it all on the website. And the toolkits are one of those places where you can really dive deep into this learning. And it's really just the beginning. This was year 1. So we're so excited to continue working together for the years to come.
Awesome. Thank you, Megan. And up next, we have Mauricio Carrasquilla with Ocean Networks Canada.
Thanks, Caroline. Hi, everyone. My name is Mauricio Carrasquilla. I'm a Postsecondary Education Coordinator at Ocean Networks Canada. And really briefly, what Ocean Networks Canada does, the big picture, is monitor the east and west coast of Canada and the Arctic by collecting underwater data. We have a number of different instruments underwater at a number of different depths, collecting oceanographic, chemical, physical, geological variables of the ocean, and all of these data are freely available on our data portal, and these data deliver solutions for science, society, and industry. And we also collaborate in ocean literacy and education and learning and community engagement team, specifically at ONC. So welcome everyone, and yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Mauricio. All right. And lastly, we have Ashley Bowes with Ecop Canada.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ashley Bowes. I'm the National Coordinator at Ecop Canada, and we are the Canada node for the Global Early Career Ocean Professional Program. And I'm just going to pause because I might be frozen or the webinar is frozen. So if someone could give me a cue in the chat, that'd be great.
You're good on my end, Ashley.
Okay, thanks, Ronnie. So we're actually part of a global program. It's endorsed by the UN Ocean Decade. So the UN Ocean Decade is happening now until 2030. And it's really an opportunity for us to collectively come together across the globe and to make decisions about the ocean's future, as well as explore solutions that work towards ocean health. So the main part of Ecop Canada is we work towards strengthening the diverse voices of ECOPs in all ocean fields across Canada. An early career ocean professional, aka ECOP, self-identifies as being early in their career with 10 years or less of professional experience in any field related to the ocean. And if you would like to join our network, it's free. We primarily exist on Slack, but we also share opportunities through email and on social media. And if you join our network, you have access to jobs, training, funding, leadership, and collaboration opportunities. You also are able to connect with fellow early career professionals and engage in lots of great conversation. So I invite you to join our network. You can head to ecopdecade.org/Canada and scroll down to fill out the membership form and receive an invite.
Thank you, Ashley. So now we're going to get into the toolkit that we are here to delve into. And Ashley is going to continue and take us through the toolkit, touching on the main themes and features. So we'll invite you all to follow along with us. I have heard rumors that this QR code may or may not work, so you can give it a try on your phone. Otherwise, we will be posting the link to the toolkit in the chat. So we'll give you a couple seconds to open that up. And Ashley, I give the floor to you.
National Coordinator at Ecop Canada, and we are the Canada node for the Global Early Career Ocean Professional Program. And I'm just going to pause because I might be frozen or the webinar is frozen. So if someone could give me a cue in the chat, that'd be great.
You're good on my end, Ashley.
Okay, thanks, Ronnie. So we're actually part of a global program. It's endorsed by the UN Ocean Decade. So the UN Ocean Decade is happening now until 2030. And it's really an opportunity for us to collectively come together across the globe and to make decisions about the ocean's future, as well as explore solutions that work towards ocean health. So the main part of Ecop Canada is we work towards strengthening the diverse voices of ECOPs in all ocean fields across Canada. An early career ocean professional, aka ECOP, self-identifies as being early in their career with 10 years or less of professional experience in any field related to the ocean. And if you would like to join our network, it's free. We primarily exist on Slack, but we also share opportunities through email and on social media. And if you join our network, you have access to jobs, training, funding, leadership, and collaboration opportunities. You also are able to connect with fellow early career professionals and engage in lots of great conversation. So I invite you to join our network. You can head to ecopdecade.org/Canada and scroll down to fill out the membership form and receive an invite. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. So now we're going to get into the toolkit that we are here to delve into. And Ashley is going to continue and take us through the toolkit, touching on the main themes and features. So we'll invite you all to follow along with us. I have heard rumors that this QR code may or may not work, so you can give it a try on your phone. Otherwise, we will be posting the link to the toolkit in the chat. So we'll give you a couple seconds to open that up. And Ashley, I give the floor to you.
Give me a second. All right, thanks everyone. So welcome to the Post-Secondary and Early Career Toolkit. You can find it on Ocean Week Canada's website under the Learning Hub tab. And this toolkit is really an opportunity for you to dive into ocean career pathways and opportunities and look at ocean issues and solutions. So we really invite you to look at what talents, creativity, and skills you can bring to the ocean sector and really explore diverse ocean sectors, primarily across Canada. So let's dive in. So we focus on pretty interactive pieces. We have videos, graphics, resources, and lessons that you can dive into. So we invite you to explore questions like, what is the sustainable blue economy? And why do we need to develop a sustainable and equitable ocean economy, and highlighting its importance. We also dive into learning about ocean issues and challenges, so you can learn more about what you can do to preserve and restore a healthy ocean, and also take action. We invite you to meet some ocean innovators. So these ocean innovators have shared stories and advice. They come from different role models and innovators across Canada who are overcoming challenges and also leading the way to caring for the ocean, but also while making a living as well. So it's really inspiring. For this early career ocean innovator series that you can see here, we actually collected stories from innovators across Canada, and they really share their story of kind of how they got involved, and offer advice on how you can use your talent and skills to maybe carve a non-linear path into the ocean sector. We also review training opportunities and networks. So if you're not sure how to break into the ocean sector, this is a great place to start. We connect you to professional networks, job opportunities, and development opportunities in Canada's blue economy. We also invite you to explore kind of how your choices on a day-to-day basis can impact the ocean. So you can see here, we highlight some guides about making sustainable seafood choices. We also go over the plastics problem and how it impacts the ocean. And this is a great resource by the Ocean Legacy Foundation. It highlights lessons about the plastic problem as well as solutions and how you can get involved and really make an impact. We also dive further into ways to connect, share. So again, this toolkit really highlights a lot of career pathways and training opportunities. You can see we kind of highlight Ikarvik, which is a great organization located in Pond Inlet, Nunavut. And I highly recommend watching this video. The organization really involves youth and focuses on bridging Indigenous knowledge and Western science. So really inspirational for innovative solutions in the ocean space. And then we loop you back into Ocean Week Canada's activities. So Meg kind of highlighted some of them, but I would encourage you to get involved by looking at events that are happening across Canada in person and virtually. There's the ocean map that Meg talked about, which connects all of Canada's local waterways, and there's an augmented reality experience that you can participate in. And you can also take even more action by exploring community science projects, as well as sharing your ocean story. So lots of opportunity to dive in, and we really hope this toolkit will inspire you to consider how your talent and skills can contribute to the ocean's future and creating a healthy ocean. And I encourage you to explore more after this webinar.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ashley. I hope that our audience can get a better idea of the purpose behind the toolkit and what exactly it offers for everyone. Perhaps some new opportunities within the ocean sector, or just learning more about ocean health and challenges affecting ocean health. All right, so now it's time for our panel discussion. So I'll invite our guest speakers to turn on their videos and we can get started with that. And just while you're joining us here, a big thank you from everyone. And on behalf of our audience for coming out, we're really looking forward to hearing all of your thoughts and perspectives. And for our audience, just a reminder that as we are speaking, feel free to put your questions into the Q&A and we will get to those eventually. So joining us, we have Aneri Garg. Aneri is a marine ecologist, science communicator, artist, and climate organizer based in Bamfield, BC. Her work with BMSC, IMPAC5 Protecting Blue Nature podcast, and the Canadian Ocean Literacy Coalition allow her to amplify stories of diversity, hope, and resilience in the marine sector using an intersectional ocean justice lens. We also have with us Ken Paul, who is a member of the Wolastoqey First Nation on the eastern coast. Over the past 10 years, he has held positions with the Wolastoqey Nation of New Brunswick, Assembly of First Nations, and the Atlantic Policy Congress of First Nations Chiefs. He has advocated for First Nations on all aspects relating to fisheries, aquaculture, ocean protection, and aquatic resources as they relate to inherent Aboriginal and treaty protected rights, governance, legislation, and policy. And we also have Ronnie Birch, considers herself a steward of the earth. During her Bachelor's of Science in Marine Biology and her experiences working in marine conservation, Ronnie gained a firsthand understanding of the threats facing our ocean today. She is a proud member of the Ecop Canada Steering Committee. All right, so thank you again for joining. And maybe just to get us started, we've heard a little bit about the work that you've been involved in, but maybe you could tell us what you're currently working on and perhaps what part of that work you are most excited about or you find the most interesting. And whoever would like to start us off can start.
Hey, I can go ahead. Thanks so much, Kaylin, and all the organizers for the wonderful walkthrough of the toolkit. As you already heard from Meg, so I work for the Canadian Ocean Literacy Coalition right now, and it's a very dynamic organization, lots of projects going on. My background is in marine science, but over the years I've gravitated more and more towards science communication as well. And so COLC, or the Canadian Ocean Literacy Coalition, and some of the projects through Ocean Week Canada, I'm currently working in communications and engagement. So what that looks like is helping run their social media, but then also storytelling. And that's something that I'm very passionate about, and stories that are messy and dramatic and interesting and inspiring. Particularly from coast to coast to coast and in the inland waterways in Canada, we're all connected to the ocean in some way. So that's what I find the most interesting and fun, is hearing and telling and amplifying stories of people out there doing incredible things.
Awesome, thank you, Aneri. Ronnie, would you like to go next?
Certainly. Well, currently I am doing my Master's of Environmental Studies at Dalhousie University, and my thesis focus is on the blue economy. So we, of course, heard that word thrown around a bit in the discussion about the toolkit, and I'm very excited about this type of research because it's quite cutting edge and it's very new. The term blue economy is a little bit ambiguous and even has some differences of opinion depending on who you talk to. But essentially, it's about putting ocean health first, and it's driving ocean wealth by prioritizing ocean health. And I really like that concept. And I think it's one that is really what is going to bring us into the future of successful ocean management. So as Kaylin introduced me, I am a marine conservation scientist, and I'm diving deeper into the interdependencies and trade-offs of not just the environmental and economic side, but also the social side of ocean priorities. And that's what I'm most excited about. As well as you'll notice my background is the Blue Futures Pathways program through the Students on Ice Foundation. And I'm happy to talk about it a little bit more in discussion, but it is another way of which I am very excited to elevate early career ocean professional voices and helping them find their calling within the blue economy.
Great. Thank you, Ronnie. All right. And over to you, Ken.
Okay, well, Iwan, Zagli Gapu and Muin Naga Nuji Awalistokit Nukutkok. Yes, my name is Ken Paul. I'm from a native community up in northern New Brunswick. I've had 3 major career shifts related to natural resources. I got kicked out of university, my first go round. I quit community college right after that, after being in there for a year and a half. So anybody who hasn't been kicked out of school yet, you guys are all doing better than I was. But my first major job was in ocean mapping. I did that for 10 years with the Canadian Hydrographic Service in Atlantic Canada, making charts of the ocean seaboard from St. Andrews, New Brunswick, all the way up to Labrador. Offshore and near shore was a really great career for a young person. It became less attractive after I started having my own family, because I would disappear for months at a time going to sea, and I would miss life changes. But luckily, I was able to shift my career to work for 10 years with Parks Canada, work with the National Park Service across Atlantic Canada. I spent a year up in the Northwest Territories as a superintendent. That's all very environmentally focused, of course, and a lot of people don't appreciate the other parts. Part of Parks Canada's mandate is cultural integrity. So I spent a lot of time with archaeologists and curators, historic sites. That was really cool. But for the past 10 years, I started working directly for First Nations chiefs. And I work in the realm of policy and fisheries. And a big part of my work is really trying to ensure that First Nations in Canada have the ability to go out and actively fish, which is part of the inherent rights, and in some cases, treaty protected rights, if those First Nations have actually signed treaties. Like, for example, in Atlantic Canada, we're all covered under treaties of peace and friendship signed with the Crown back in the 1700s, before Canada became a country. In BC, most of the First Nations are not treaty First Nations, but they still have inherent rights. The big problem that we have is that the fisheries is regulated in Canada under the Federal Department of Fisheries and Oceans. And it just seems to be that the department uses its science to try to maximize the economic benefit of our fisheries, which is a fundamentally different approach than what First Nations will look at fisheries and access towards fisheries and how they want to utilize fisheries. When First Nations in general see fisheries, they see, first of all, the fish as our relatives, and secondly, seeing these relatives as a way to provide for the family for not only food purposes, but for economic purposes. But no matter what First Nations do, they're going to highlight the environmental impact first, rather than trying to maximize economic efforts. So the opportunity within this is I guess the emergence of traditional knowledge or Indigenous knowledge systems, as was shown in one of the pre-slides, where if First Nations are supported and empowered, we can do a lot of work on management of the ocean space, of our fisheries activities and things like that, and share those lessons with others. We know that nationally and internationally, there are a number of science crises related to climate change. And but the more supports that we have for First Nations, the more I believe that we'll have a chance on that. My work right now is really related to a lot of policy change, both nationally, internationally, and regionally, to allow this to happen, and to try to get more of our elders and our young people out on the water so that they can actually have influence over the resources, so that upon which they rely. So in general, that's kind of what I do.
Awesome. Thank you, Ken. All right. Now, as a segue from that, the toolkit does focus on post-secondary students and interested early career individuals. So maybe you could share some of your own experiences within and career pathways within the ocean sector, and touch on certain experiences in particular if you think they would be valuable for our audience to hear, for those people that are interested in perhaps similar pathways as yourselves. Maybe we'll start this time with Ronnie.
Yeah, certainly. I think my experience education-wise was pretty standard to many students who go into marine sciences. I think when I first started out going into marine biology, I thought I'd probably take the route that is most suggested in school, which is, you do your honors, then you go do your master's, and then you go do your PhD, and you do it on a very specific, possibly obscure organism, which I have many colleagues who excel at. And then I realized that probably wasn't for me. I did get a taste of it. I did do some field work and some internships at labs, and I realized I was becoming much more interested in the systems thinking of the ocean and of ocean management. So I started seeking out those experiences. But I really got a lot of value in starting out with science communication internships and work experiences where I got to interact with people who were very far outside of my inner circle of marine sciences, and get to talk with those who maybe hadn't really considered much about what was in their blue backyard, and see that kind of fun communication and spark that happens when you chat with others and you make it seem, and you just see that they think that the ocean is this really cool place and that you're sharing a really cool thing with them. And I think I value most the experiences that got me that opportunity to share my passion with others. And the mentors that I met along the way were certainly very key in that aspect. So I often encourage other people who might be in their bachelor's or in marine sciences to seek out people that you find are really inspiring and introduce yourself, because often just sitting at the feet of somebody who's experienced and has a cool career, or is a career that you think is cool, is really well worth your time. And that's certainly what I found for myself.
Awesome. Thank you, Ronnie. Yeah, it's valuable to know what has helped get you to where you are, and what helps different people achieve their goals. Aneri, what about you? Is there something that comes to mind?
Yeah, absolutely. I did not have a pretty typical introduction to the marine science world. I grew up in the prairies, so pretty landlocked in Saskatchewan and Manitoba, but lucky enough to visit rivers and lakes and be connected to water in different ways. And in my undergrad degree, I actually did biology and environmental science, and started just gravitating more towards coastal and marine studies and sciences, from looking at, what's inside the single cell of an Arctic algae, to, in my master's, then looking more at bigger scale processes like ecological processes on coral reefs. And I found, and something I really like that Ashley mentioned this in her portion of the presentation today, is that my own personal journey is very nonlinear, and hearing other people on the panel today, no journey is linear. And just a note that even though this sounds, or what you might hear sounds, very neat and tidy, it never is, and that's okay and great. And I think that is something to lean into, and let the flow and let the fluidity, let yourself go with it, essentially. Sounds very vague, but I think in that process, it's more so finding your skills. What do you enjoy doing? What is something you can get paid to do, and to try new things? Oftentimes, trying new opportunities is one of the best ways to find out about new opportunities, and just talking to people. The other thing I want to mention is that it hasn't always been easy, and it still isn't easy in many ways. There are times where I have felt and feel like I don't belong in this space still. And I think it's important, even when you are seeking out mentors, to think about that too. Mentors aren't perfect. They've had their own struggles. But if you think about other people that you're like, oh, this person seems so cool, I want to do what they do when I grow up, which I'll probably say for the rest of my life. But just remember that if you're feeling self-conscious, somebody else probably is too. So try to just work past that kind of shyness. And my hot take is that imposter syndrome is a myth, but imposter culture is real. White supremacy culture is real, and the consequences are very real to folks in the marine sector and outside. But you're also not alone. Through Ecop and many other communities that are growing, I just want to say that you do belong. So this is a very vague advice, but that's my take.
Thank you, Aneri. I think vague is good sometimes. I think we tend to get caught up in the tiny details. And so, yeah, I appreciate that perspective. Ken, are there any experiences that you'd like to share about your own pathway to where you're at right now?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think Aneri actually hit on a few really important things. One of the mistakes that we tend to make, we put a lot of pressure on 18-year-olds. And we tell them, you're graduating high school, what you choose from now on is going to determine your pathway for the rest of your life. And really, like, if you don't have any other experience, like in the work field, like, how do you know? Like, I've had 3 major career shifts in my career. I was an ocean mapper and engineer. I worked with Parks Canada on management plans and policies. And now I'm working in fisheries, oceans governance, and things like that. So really, what I try to explain to people now is that whatever you are choosing, actually just enjoy that. Like my undergrad in science, I have an undergrad in science with a major in mathematics. Now, there is no clear career path with a math degree, right? But what I had found is that because of other interests, they brought me into ocean mapping. So 3-dimensional conceptualization was actually part of the tool sets that I already had before I went into the field. The other thing that I do is I set short-term goals. I figure that if I start a new job, that I'm going to give it about 3 years. And I'm going to do the best I can for 3 years and then take a pause and decide if I need to make a change. And a few times I did. But for those 3 years, I didn't worry about it because, you know, I had stable employment and I just went with it. I think that's also pretty important to set yourself goals, whether you're thinking of doing things for 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, whatever it is. But don't think that just because you have chosen a job career path now, that's going to be the only thing that's going to carry you through for the rest of your life. It could. And if you really like the field, great. But if you need to change, then you can change. You can go back to school. What I know is learned about the factors of success are, especially for students, is number one, you have to show up. You have to show up to your classes. You have to show up to your exams. Like, you know, I know, you know, and I didn't do that. This is how I kind of know when I paid the price. Like I was very good at partying when I was 19 years old. And nobody forced me to go to classes, so I didn't actually end up going, and therefore I didn't do it. The second most important thing that I found is do your assignments. Because if you do your assignments, at least make an attempt, you'll study material at the end of the term, you'll be better prepared for exams because it's easy to not do assignments. And the third thing that I found was really important was actually to pay your bills. Pay your electric bill, pay your cell phone bill, pay your rent, because one of the worst things you can do is trying to like evade people you owe money to because you decided to use those funds for something else. Like really what it's about is like minimizing all of those things that you can control because other things are going to happen along the way. And if other things happen along the way, but you've taken care of all the things you can take care of, then you can adjust. And as far as like career choices, I'll use ocean mapping as an example. Like we made charts for people to run ships so that they didn't run into buoys, they didn't run into like shoals, they run aground. But what I also found out at the time was that other people were using these maps. So I learned from biologists and geologists and people that were doing like benthic habitat mapping in the ocean floor. And once I started learning about why these other people are interested in this information, that really broadened my range. And that's really one of the things that made me interesting to Parks Canada to work in national parks, because I had a broader environmental focus, not just a map maker. So those are the kind of things that I would suggest doing, but, you know, give yourself a break. Don't be too hard on yourself. Don't think that, you know, this is the only, like it's a straight career path, because there's very, very few people that have that linear path. And if they do, and they want to do that, that's great. But others, you know, we have lives, things change, our interests change, our skill sets change. Just keep your eyes open, and when opportunities present themselves, and they will, you'll know when they come. Just be prepared to take that step forward and take that chance.
I like what you said, Ken, about it's not always the same, whatever you go into. And this sentence popped into my mind that the ocean careers are dynamic, just in the same way that the ocean itself is dynamic.
Yeah, and I connected with just kind of dipping your toes in a bunch of different things and not being afraid to try out things before you commit to something, or perhaps not even commit to one job necessarily. But I've definitely had my turn dipping my toes around, and I think it's very valuable to get to know different groups, work with different kinds of people, and yeah, so thank you for that. Yeah,
there's something else that came to mind in this conversation in terms of trying new things. I think also sometimes in the ocean sector, there's this idea that you have to enter through a very specific marine field, whether it be management or science or policy. But I think in the same way, when we think, in my past experience in terms of climate organizing, when we think about who can be in the ocean sector, it could be anyone. Like, is your interest marketing? Is your interest data? Is your interest creating media? All of these skill sets are applicable in the ocean sector. So it doesn't have to be on the specific route or have marine in the name, for example. But in the same way, I think when we think about other sort of work or roles in our community, like teachers or caregivers or parents, everyone, if you're working in that kind of role, that is also a lot of power and potential for the climate, but then also in turn the ocean.
Definitely, yeah, that's a really good point, Aneri. And now sort of kind of switching into some of the toolkit's themes. The toolkit talks a lot about the blue economy, and it's sort of a big word to unpack. So the toolkit does define it as the sustainable use of ocean resources for economic growth, improved livelihoods and jobs, while preserving the health of ocean ecosystems. So sort of striking that balance between economic, social, and environmental priorities. I'm curious what your thoughts are on this definition, maybe, or what the blue economy means to you. And then we've got a question in the Q&A that we'll get to, kind of connected to this as well. So whoever would like to start us off, feel free to jump in. I know, big question.
I'm going to default to Aneri or Ken because I kind of already answered it. So I'll go last or second.
Sounds good.
I was going to say, Ronnie, you're the expert in this. But yeah, I guess you did mention, I like how you talked about ocean health being central in your own definition. And I think I'm definitely more on the side where I don't love the term, actually. And I think that's because the word economy is central, which may convey a priority that isn't actually a priority in the blue economy. For example, in the US, there's the term the Blue New Deal, other kind of terms that come to mind that I think center people more would be ocean justice or blue justice, or at least using that when we think about the blue economy. My concern of just the term itself is just that it centers capital and not people, potentially, even though people are obviously very integral and interconnected with the economy. But then again, that's just, I think, the detail of the name. I think it's an evolving conversation, and opportunities like this, and a lot of really interesting work coming out with marine social scientists, Nathan Bennett, Alexander Moyer, Ronnie here, Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson, talk about blue justice and centering people in the conversation. Also within this ocean decade, I think sometimes we think about the blue economy growing from 2020 to 2030, but this is sort of a foundation and an opportunity to set up a foundation for ever. We'll see about that with the world, but for ocean health and the people on the ground, the watery people. So that's sort of my take with blue economy. And I have caution when it comes to blue washing, for example, using words that sound really good, like sustainable or equitable, but then pairing that with action on the ground for what does that actually look like for people. So that's my perspective on the blue economy. I don't know, Ken or Ronnie, if you have anything else to add to that.
Well, I think, Aneri, like, you stole my speaking notes again, because I do have very similar reservations about this whole blue economy. Like, well, first of all, the term itself, it's a beautiful term in that it means everything to everybody. Everybody sees themselves as part of this, and because who doesn't want to be part of the blue aspect of it, which is implying the ocean. But the economy, like, again, focusing on the economy, like you had said, Aneri, this is one of the issues that I'm having some problems with. I'm concerned that this is going to be, that it could turn into just a funding vehicle for major organizations that are looking to exploit resources in the ocean sector. And within the documentation that the Department of Fisheries has put out so far, they do make references to sustainability, but it's not the prime focus. It's about building the economy, Canada's economy. And if we don't have that balance between environmental sustainability and economic prosperity, then we are going to continue to perpetuate problems in the ocean sector that's going to impact what happens on land with respect to hurricanes and atmospheric rivers and all of these other large-scale natural disasters that we've been seeing the last couple of years. However, I will also say that there are going to be major career opportunities spun out because of this, and that whatever field you're, and we talked about, Ronnie mentioned this before, like whatever field you're involved with, you can find career opportunities within the ocean sector. You don't even necessarily have to go out in ships if that's not your thing. Because I know people are, afraid of going out to sea, and then seasickness is a real thing for some people and whatnot. But there is major opportunity within Canada's ocean economy. So as far as the blue economy strategy, it's something that's going to happen. It's going to be something that's going to become more prevalent, and there's going to be investments from Canada into a bunch of these different sectors. So if you're an entrepreneur, you could set up your business now to try to figure out ways to go in there. If you want to work for a multinational organization that's working within Canada's blue economy strategy, that's fantastic too. If you want to work within the academic field, keep teaching others about different discoveries and things that happen in the blue economy, that's fantastic as well. But just know that right now, because it's such a big term and that there's just too many people are going to be really lobbying hard to push it in this direction or that direction, depending on what sector they're in. And the clarity of what the blue economy is, I don't know if we'll ever actually realize what that is. We just know that it's going to be ocean focused.
Yeah, not realizing whatever it actually is kind of the pitfall of my research. But yeah, I can see that the ambiguity with the term blue economy is a real problem, even here in Canada, because Canada has already committed to so many resources, money, time, effort, attention to this blue economy. And it looks a little perilous because we don't actually know how to divvy up these resources to the right people. Like, how do we make sure, like Aneri said, we're not blue washing and having industries and companies saying that they're a part of the blue economy just to get a piece of this pie, of this action. I think it's kind of a double-edged sword with the word economy, or having a focus on the economic side of things, because as our technological advances continue, the ocean only looks more and more like the new gold rush, the new area to dive into for economic gain. So it's almost like we have to focus on the industry side of things, because if we don't, it could just run away without us actually realizing what is happening. But that's definitely not ignoring the fact that as we focus on the industry side of things, we need to have a clear and concise idea of how it's enacted in a socially equitable and environmentally sustainable way.
Thank you, everyone. I know that's a pretty loaded question, so I appreciate all of those perspectives. We also had a question come up related to that, and maybe it's sort of been answered already. What is the difference between the blue economy and the sustainable or regenerative blue economy? So maybe it's more of a specific term. Maybe it's the hope of what the blue economy should look like. Do any of you have thoughts on that?
The language is another one of the problems of the blue economy, because if we can't agree on the certain language around it, how are we going to speak to the same common vision? So depending on who you're talking to, those two actually mean the same thing. Like the blue economy already has an inherently sustainable aspect built into it. However, sometimes in the literature or in other types of media forms, you will see blue economy and ocean economy used interchangeably. Which is why some organizations have decided to put the word sustainable right in front of it. But it's almost like a double negative in some cases, because it's like the sustainable ocean economy. However, really it just means that ocean health is the primary pillar for the blue economy.
Ronnie, I appreciated what you said before around the double-edged sword of resource extraction is starting and happening. So there still very much is a role for regulation and ensuring that there's solid policy from the get-go that centers people and centers ecosystems. And an example that comes to mind is, well, deep sea mining, that's happening in a few years. So what regulations are we coming together to agree on? Or even offshore wind. The US is far more advanced when it comes to regulating and researching offshore wind opportunities. And there's a lot of potential in Canada for that. So those are just a couple examples that come to mind.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm. We have a question. I'm just seeing a lot of questions pop in that are very relevant to what we're talking about. So I think I'll just ask them now. Do you think untangling fisheries research from the Canadian federal government would help in having a more conservation-based fishery instead of a profit-based one? Do you think that will ever happen? And maybe Ken, you want to start here? You might have some thoughts about this.
Yeah, well, the conservation-based fishery is going to happen because we are ignoring it. Like like there are only so many fish in the water, and the big problem we have in our fishery is that when they started making it into an exportable commodity, so making people fish more than what they actually needed to eat and trade locally and make it an export, they started developing bigger boats and bigger traps and bigger trawl nets and things like that. And now we're feeling the impacts of that. The thing that we can't control, besides our human behavior, is what's happening globally with respect to the warming of the ocean sector, of the ocean itself, the habitats. And that's having an impact on ocean migration. It's having an impact on rivers and streams in which these wonderful creatures spawn. So that's part of the challenge we have working in this environmental field, is changing our behavior so that we fish smarter, not harder. And all these management plans, they're really about controlling human behavior. So if we don't make the corrections, Mother Nature will make the corrections for us. So it's a complex question.
It is. Thank you, Ken. Aneri and Ronnie, do you have thoughts to add to that? All right. Well, another question sort of related to environmental challenges and industries affecting ocean health. I'm just curious if there's a certain kind of major environmental challenge that you've encountered in your work that you feel strongly about, or you sort of, seen in a direct experience that you'd like to speak to, and maybe any thoughts around this, perhaps what you see as being a potential solution, or some of the questions you might have yourselves. Also a very big question. We're here for the big questions today.
Well, it's coming back to like reality, what's happening. Like, we had a hurricane here in Atlantic Canada 2 months ago. It's the third one that we've had since 2003. And what my concern is that we have, like, I have friends that live in communities that are on the coast, and they're suffering like from all these major floods that are happening because of the hurricanes themselves. And they could probably take it on the chin this year and get their insurance to cover some of their costs of repairs and things like that, but they worry about their groundwater and all these other things. Well, how many years can they actually endure that? Like, we're going to have to start moving communities, because we can't build bigger walls. We can't hold back the sea. And this is all a direct impact of like our whole carbon-based economy, because we are still using fossil fuels and just burning things up and letting them go in the atmosphere. We also have a problem with ocean acidification, which means we actually have to plant more plants in the ocean and nurture that along. But I feel as though a lot of people are still in climate denial, that we are still not drawing the direct line impact from our activities to actually what is happening in the planet. And unless we could fundamentally change what we need to do, then we are going to suffer. And if we start losing fish species, if our rivers don't have healthy fish in them, then we will cease to exist as a human species. Now, I don't want to be a doom and gloomer either. I believe that we actually can turn this around, but we actually have to work at it. And I'm really encouraged by people that are going to ocean careers, because we will face this stuff. We will, everybody that's in the ocean career will understand and become much more literate than I was when I was in my 20s. And so you can make a living, you can make a decent living at this, but also make a decent living doing something that's actually positive, not only for this generation, but for the future generations. Because in the future, we will be the ancestors. They will talk about us and what we did and what we failed to do. So we are just continuing on the work from our ancestors to where we are today. But if we start adopting the mentality of the tragedy of the commons, where it's like, well, planet's going to pot, let's just everybody for themselves, then to me, that's like an insane notion. And I can't work with that type of mentality, that kind of person. So it's hard work. It's easy to fall into that pessimism trap, especially coming out of a global pandemic. All the things you're hearing now, if you watch the news, it's all bad news, and we're worried about the economy and inflation and blah, 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 blah. But regardless, there is a lot of positivity within humanity in this world. And we really, I'm hoping people are going to see themselves as being able to contribute to that part of it. Just do what you can. Like, none of us on this call is going to save the planet from climate crisis, but within our world, within our circle of influence, if we can make positive changes in there, then all those positive changes together will make a collective positive change. That's what I'm hoping.
Yeah, I was going to say, is the climate crisis too big of a thing to bring up as the largest environmental concern? And it is huge, but I think, like Ken was saying, there's a lot of opportunities here too. In ecology, there's this term of hope spots. So there are areas that show a lot of resilience and resistance to environmental changes and to extreme shifts. And those typically have a lot of diversity. They're at the intersection of different kinds of habitats or ecosystems potentially. And I think that there are those hope spots when we think about people and actions as well. And in the lessons that we learn from the ocean of things aren't siloed, borders are fake. These are lessons we can learn from the ocean, that things are becoming more interdisciplinary. You can be in your field and still be reaching out to other folks and building local resilience. And I think another opportunity or place I see leadership has been with Indigenous-led conservation groups, Black women, other groups who have been historically and contemporarily oppressed, who are organizing and who have a history of organizing, who have a history of the world has ended before in a way and have resilience. Mm-hmm. So I think that's where I also see a lot of hope and potential when it comes to the climate crisis. Oh, sorry, there was one other thing I wanted to mention, is that although there's a lot of really cool technological advances, I personally don't think that like technology is going to save us. I think that we have a lot of practices that are already in place, technology is already in place, and it's more a matter of will and implementing, like great public transit, for example, decarbonizing, and not just climate denial, but delay seems to be my biggest concern at this moment. Intentionally knowing what's happening, but delaying any kind of real progress politically.
I would almost define that as climate apathy is the feeling that I get from a lot of decision makers, from people in positions of power. And I think I'm probably going to choose the same as Ken and Aneri, as like that is like that larger overarching problem of climate apathy is probably, I think, the most direct, one of the biggest problems facing ocean health today. And you can go specific about ocean apathy as well too. And when it comes to like industry, especially because I think in this consumeristic world, we are only really seeing the now in a lot of ways. I think a potential rethinking of that conservation is not cost to production, but is in fact an investment into ocean health, into ocean assets that if an industry, even if you talk to a very staunch business person or a staunch industry, you can kind of configure the thinking of your business and your livelihood is not going to continue in this way unless we put time, money, effort, and progress into ocean conservation. And I am seeing that switch among younger organizations, and that's very hopeful.
Yeah, here's a question sort of regarding this question that we're asking ourselves. So in terms of combating the climate crisis, do you see the most change at the community level or the policy level through government?
Okay, I'll answer that. I'm very biased on this, but it's got to come from the community level. It really does. That's where you actually have the impact. You can't wait for the government, whether you're talking federal, provincial, whatever, to catch up. They will eventually catch up, but they really don't lead. they react. And unfortunately, it seems like the reaction of the climate crisis is over reaction to like disasters that have already happened, mitigating the impacts, rather than actually leading, because the hard decisions are not being made. At the community level, you have some autonomy to actually do things locally and help educate people, and especially young people that are going into like, different kinds of making choices about career options and things like that. That's really where the important work is right now. For those that are a little bit older, it's really hard to change the minds of older people. They're set, they've lived their lives, they lived a certain way, and it's really hard for them to change and comprehend sort of what's going on in a lot of cases. But like, it would be nice if there was actual leading from a national, federal level, but I think we're just kind of tinkering around the edges, the national policy level.
Yeah, I feel like there's a bit of both in a way, but I agree that the leadership happens at a community level, and that there's a lot of power in collective action. I think there's a lot of power in communities coming together to demand what kind of changes we want to see. But that happens on the ground, that happens in communities. And I think there's so much power in terms of municipalities. Yeah, when it comes to mitigation and adaptation. And I think that there's also a lot of growth when it comes to acting with other people, not necessarily in the systems that are just like, yes, like, how do I frame this? There's a lot of power, I think, in politics outside of electoral politics as well.
Yeah, the great conversations you can have, with your neighbor, for example, and asking the people around you what they care about. Not being afraid to have those conversations, I think, too, in like a casual setting, like at the dinner table or, at the coffee shop with a friend. I feel like sometimes we step around them, but we probably shouldn't.
Totally, and entering those conversations with a bit of a curiosity too, and asking why or what led you to feel this way. And also recognizing that it's not your job to convince everyone either. Like, assess your own health, assess what's your relationship to this person. You can even ask, is there anything that I would actually say that could convince you otherwise? That might save you time and emotional labor, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. So obviously it's a difficult question. It can be, and it's difficult work that people are doing in this area. And so someone from our audience is wondering, how do we balance the possibly difficult work life and our outside of work lives? It often seems like ocean professionals are standing on the edge of burnout because of how serious the issues we are facing are. And I think this is useful too for the post-secondary students and early career folks that are interested in this type of work as well.
Yeah, burnout is definitely something I've seen in this field, because I think it's for really any field that's passion led and passion forward. And what I always try to do and try to be mindful of, and what Aneri kind of talked about, is those hope spots, but with people. So I kind of see myself as one piece of the puzzle, and I know that I'm going to focus really hard and do my best in this one area, and I don't have to worry about ocean storytelling, because Aneri's got that, and I know she's great at what she does, and that gives me hope and helps me calm that burnout a little bit. And I don't necessarily need to worry too much about fisheries science or ocean governance, because I know Ken Paul's got that, and he's gonna just do the best in his case scenario. And that kind of interweaving, I feel like that kind of big map picture of people as hope spots really helps my burnout, at least. And I find being a part of networks and organizations where I get to see people, especially early career professionals, ocean professionals, doing the most is really what keeps me going.
Ronnie, I love that description. Somebody described this to me once as there's this weaving, and the climate crisis is interconnected to many other crises, right? Social crises, colonization, racism, there's just a lot interwoven. And so if we're all doing our part to unravel a thread or to weave a thread of the weaving that we do want, then there's a lot of comfort in that.
I think maybe on a practical note too, though, there's definitely a point where you should know your worth. And in this field, I think sometimes we can easily get caught up in a lot of volunteer opportunities and unpaid situations, because why not? We're passionate, we love it, and we want to help. But there's definitely a point where knowing the value that you bring to the table and being able to ask for the appropriate compensation for that is extremely important, and does take a little bit of introspection to reach, and to not be afraid of doing it, because, you know, imposter culture is real, but that doesn't mean it should rob you of your proper ask.
Thank you everyone for sharing those thoughts. Just with time in mind, we'll sort of switch it back to maybe more personal experiences within your careers and your pathways to where you're at now. So this person has asked, related to the conversation on a non-linear pathway, I have a background in human healthcare, as I've been working as a nurse for a few years, and I want to know what careers in ocean conservation are available that can be linked to my experience. Yeah, I'm wondering if you have more to add on where I could start with that endeavor.
Well, first off, that's awesome. I'm really excited that you are thinking of taking your skill set and applying it to the ocean. The ocean would be lucky to have you. We'd all be very lucky to have you. I might put a bit of a plug for the Blue Futures Pathways program. There you can find on their website called The Port, you can find some learning modules and information and resources about what careers look like outside of maybe the traditional seafarer or ocean science and academia. And as well as there's opportunities for internship in different spaces, in different ocean spaces for ages 18 to 30, if that encompasses you. So I'd say that's a really, that might be a good resource to start, but for sure also join the Ecop Canada Slack as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Ronnie. Aneri or Ken, do you have anything to add to that?
Sorry, so you said that the individual had background in health, was that, or?
That's right, yes.
Well, see, and another thing to consider, and people do realize this, but it's not a straightforward path. But environmental health is actually a very, very important aspect towards prevention. Like, people will go out in nature to get mental health, like get stabilized from their mental health, because it's hard to be depressed when you're hanging around with trees or floating in a boat. You know, these are positive things. And I think it's underappreciated, to be honest with you, but I know that there's a lot of benefits towards that. And as well as eating healthily. So getting your fresh fish protein from the ocean sector is actually really helpful for your body as well. Those are the kind of career things that I would consider if I had a background in health, like to work in that ocean sector and try to look at the environmental health aspect of it. Because I think those are fields that are going to be opening up as health care itself is changing and progressing. So
that seems to be also a skill set that could take you many places,
yeah,
to many coasts of lakes or rivers. And I know folks who are in the ocean sector by proximity. Maybe they have a professional job that they work in a clinic, you know, on a 9 to 5 to survive in this capitalist world and make money. But perhaps in a hobby or another aspect of your life, in that discovery of work-life balance, you could be involved in the ocean sector as well. So that comes to mind as well.
Wonderful. Thank you. We also have some comments coming in. Thank you to our audience for those. Let's see what else we have in the Q&A. So this is a particular question for Aneri. It seems there are so many people trying to do storytelling and content creation, but are there actually many opportunities to find work in these fields specifically related to oceans?
Yeah, there are some. I'm relatively new to this, but there certainly are. And I think some avenues that I've recently learned about that would be worth investigating. Well, first, join the Ecop Canada network, because I know as funding moves through different environmental NGOs, it's often like, oh man, like we could really use somebody who's doing this, and we could put it in the Slack. But there's also great opportunities with provincial or federal grants through arts councils. If you have your own dream, if you join the Slack and are like, I have a dream, I want to make this, and Ashley Bose is an amazing producer, you could message Ash and just say, hey, Ashley, let's make this story, or let's make this film, or whatever. So I think there's a ton of opportunities. It's growing. So I think your best bet would be to at least start by joining the Slack and then start talking to people.
I've had it said to me before that the ocean has a PR problem, and that you know, making the ocean appeal to other people. And there's so many types of audiences out there. There's so many audiences. I think you could choose one that you're passionate about, and you'd probably find a niche.
And storytellers have access to unique audiences yourself through your own communities. So that's also something worth reflecting on.
Yeah, and I would say like we are all just a collection of stories, really. Like, we've had an opportunity as panelists to tell a little bit of a story about our work life, but we have other stories. The best speakers, the ones that actually have the best careers, are those that are able to take what they're doing and explain it to other people, because it's all really part of a story. Whether you're a specialist that's studying benthic habitat, whether you're a generalist that just looks at, I don't know, different kinds of climate impacts around the world, the really important thing is to be able to communicate that to somebody else. And what I tell people is that if I can't explain this, my work or anything like that, to my mother, then I really actually don't know what I'm doing. And it's not using fancy words, because when I talk to my colleagues, yeah, I can talk and use all of these acronyms and all these different terminologies, that because we work in that field. But I always got to filter it off. Like, what if I'm meeting somebody for the first time that has nothing to do with my sector? I should be able to tell them a little story about what that actually means. Like, why do we study lobster larvae? For the sake of studying lobster larvae? You know, like why do we use satellite imagery? You know, we use that because we're actually trying to find something out, and it's all really part of a story. So storytelling is so important. And if you are a good storyteller, you will have a long career no matter what field you go into.
Definitely. Yeah, that's all very valuable advice. And I like the comment on there being a bunch of audiences out there and a lot of diversity in that. And I think that makes it less overwhelming when you are someone interested in working in this area, because everyone has their niche, their specialty, or something they're interested in. So there's something out there for everyone. And I think at this point, anything is valuable, right? Anything is helpful. So awesome. Well, we are kind of running out of time here. Thank you again to all of you for coming in and sharing all of these amazing thoughts with us. And to the audience, I hope that you have had all of your questions answered if you put them in there. So if you'd like to stay tuned, you can check out the websites of all of the organizations that we heard about at the beginning. And as mentioned, this is one of Ocean Week Canada's toolkits that we touched on today, but there are more. So you can go to their website, oceanweekcan.ca, to see the other ones and also follow their channels on social media. Thank you everyone for participating and coming out today. It's great to see so many of you in the audience, and thank you again to Aneri, Ronnie, and Ken for being here and speaking with us all.